Testing, testing, testing. This is May the 3rd, second, excuse me, of the year 2000. And it is my happy privilege to introduce a dear friend to be interviewed for the Clark County Historical Society, giving a story of her life as she chooses to tell it, with whatever incidentals she would like to bring in. This is Mrs. Betsy Hagelberg. I will now ask you, Betsy, to start us off with perhaps a chronology of your career. Maybe that would give us a starting ground.
Okay, and as far
as
Springfield is concerned?
Yes.
Okay, we came in Springfield. When we came to Springfield in 1964, I was just getting ready to have my second child. And so the early part of my career was at home with my children, and I certainly enjoyed that. And when my son was in preschool, then I taught in preschool, Happy Time Play School.
Where was that?
On St. Paris Pike, and Martha Harchie was director of that program at the time. And so I worked there for a couple of years, and then I taught kindergarten at St. Joseph's School. They had just started a kindergarten program, and about 1 year. And so I had the fun of, developing their kindergarten program.
Where was that located physically?
At right next to St. Joseph Church on Kenton Street.
Oh, yes.
And they had one of every grade up through middle school, and they wanted to start a kindergarten. So that was fun for me. I taught half days for 7 years there. One year I taught full day.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there I went on to Emerson School to teach there for 7 years, and then retired. So that's been my work career.
What had you done before coming to Springfield?
We lived in Michigan at that time, and just prior to that we were in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I taught in Willow Run, which is right near Ypsilanti. It's an area that grew up during the war, and it was supposed to be dispersed after the war, but it was still there. And then before that I taught in Granville, Michigan, which is right outside Grand Rapids. Then I taught high school home economics and junior high home economics.
Home economics, good for you.
I went to Michigan State. And, so.
That's history now,
That's
isn't
history.
it? Yeah. I remember Mrs. Johnson that had the Wittenberg program at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and she just died recently.
Did she?
Yeah, completely out of any consciousness at all.
Oh.
Yeah, too bad.
Yeah. I think it's too bad there isn't more done with home economics, and I think maybe they're getting back into some of that, because I think a lot of our young people need a lot of skills that are home and family related that they're not getting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's taking some different directions, but I hope that it'll become stronger again.
Maxine even got into it at DePaul University when she was there.
Did she?
Yeah, in the 30s. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good programming.
Okay, what did you find as you reflect back now on about the Springfield City school system? When you joined it as a teacher, did you find some rank deficiencies then, which we seem to have, maybe of a different type today? I need to get a record of what our school teachers, present and retired, thought of and think of our school system today.
Well, I'd just like to start with teaching at St. Joe in the parochial school. That was a wonderful way to start, and I was retraining for elementary education at that time, so I was taking a class and then teaching, and for me,
I was very focused then on my teaching and on my classes, and I was not thinking of the city as a whole. I was thinking of what I was doing at St. Joe. And one wonderful thing about teaching in the parochial system is that you have families that really want their child in a particular school, and they make an effort to get them there. They're paying tuition. They tend to be very involved. And even those families that couldn't afford to have their children go there but made some efforts to get scholarships or to make it known they wanted their children to go there had an investment in having their child in that school. So you get a certain feeling when you have that kind of parent support and that educational desire that I felt was very strong, and one of the real positive things about teaching in a parochial school. So then when I left St. Joe, I needed to have a full-time job because of the change in my life, and so I taught in the city schools, in Emerson School, which was only about 3 blocks away. And the big difference there was there were children, well, at St. Joseph's School, children came from all around the county. I actually mapped it one time because of the busing that some of the kids were being involved in, and I felt so bad to have kids spend a long time on the bus. But in Emerson, but there was still a lot from that area. At Emerson School, it was a very low socioeconomic area, and a lot of the children were from very disadvantaged homes. And so that colored the nature of the classroom, you know, and the needs of the children. They had very great needs. And the program I taught in was the Chapter 1 preschool program, which was for children that they had to test in low in order to qualify for the program. And so we tried to get them special help, sort of like Head Start. In fact, Head Start's filled in that place now, and Chapter 1 is not doing that anymore in Springfield City Schools. But as part of that program, Chapter 1 was, most of Chapter 1 were reading teachers. And so since there were a small number of us, as the program grew that taught in the preschool program, we were connected with the reading teachers. And so when they had workshops and things like that, we went to the workshops with the reading teachers, the idea being we were teaching pre-reading skills and so forth, and preparing children to go on into the reading program. And those early programs were wonderful. We had a couple of people, Garnet Sharp, I have to mention her name because she was a facilitator at that time, that helped bring in lots of absolutely outstanding people to do workshops. And as preschool teachers, we got to be in on those workshops and learn a lot about how to prepare children to make learning and reading and so forth exciting, and to prepare them as they went on and hopefully make up for some of their deficiencies. So we felt those early years of Chapter 1 were kind of golden years. I did. I think one of the things that I've felt about Springfield City Schools over the years has been that there's been a lot of experimenting with programs that weren't fully supported and that weren't continued for a long enough time to decide whether they were valid or not, and then were considered not being successful. And I sometimes think that there's been too much hasty change, but that's one person's perspective, but I've seen it in a lot of different ways.
When you came to Emerson, that was what year?
1983.
How did you find the parent relationship to you as a newcomer, when of course those parents, being a floating population, really had no roots either?
Right. that was an exciting thing for me because I got into the elementary education as a parent helper in the preschool program originally before I was hired as a teacher. So I came in as a parent and then became a teacher. So I liked working with parents, and part of the, at St. Joe, I used parents all the time in my classroom. So I would have, yeah, I would have parents come in every day. In fact, I remember I got a Martha Holden Jennings Foundation grant, and also we got one from Shelley Foundation and one other foundation in Springfield. The Eagles, I think it was, all contributed towards a program that we were working on in my kindergarten class, and that was to involve older people in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And I remember calling Betty Pitzer because I thought, oh boy, you know, there's Elderly United and we'll be able to get some people. And at the time Betty said, you know, all these people have raised their families and they're ready to do something different. And so I couldn't tap that resource then. Like, I mean, times have changed a little bit. But I did have a few people that came in, grandmothers and another elderly lady who came in and did a lot of work in my classroom, plus parents that came in every day. In fact, since I was only teaching half day, they couldn't get a regular teacher substitute for me, so I trained my parents, and if I had to be gone a day, one of my parents took my class because they were in there so much, and they could do that in the parochial school. You couldn't do that, you know, at city school. But so when I went into the Chapter 1 program, one of the requirements was that parents, when they had a child in the program, the parent was supposed to help once a month. And so we were supposed to involve that parent in that classroom once a month. And
for a whole day?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was only a morning or an afternoon, so it was a couple, 3 hours. And so part of the idea was to model ways of working with young children and model discipline and get the children, the parents involved with the children. And that was a lot of fun. I had 2 aides that worked with me, and they were very good at working with the parents, Kim Moore and Marjorie Hinton. And Marjorie Hinton has now gone on to get finish her college degree and is working on teacher's certificate right now. And I'm just so proud of her. But anyway, so we had parents that came in and you know, they became wonderful helpers, and many of them went on to be boosters in the elementary school. So I thoroughly enjoyed working with the parents. And it was kind of our goal. We have a couple parents I can think of. I remember one man that, you know, he was actually kind of scary to us, you know, and he had not liked school, and he was, you know, he was bringing his daughter there reluctantly, and he roared up on his motorcycle with his kid on the back, and you know, I have to admit we were a little bit, you know, awed by his, you know, attitude, but we were determined that he would see that we wanted the best for his daughter. And so we worked on him and got him to come in and help a time or two. And there was a time I was at Kenwood one year, and that was the year, and that there had been somebody hanging around the school that they were concerned about at school, and so they were really watching the kids carefully. And this father came up to school to kind of watch her out, to help us, to make sure that nothing was going to happen to these kids. He just did an about face. He became very supportive and very helpful, and so that was a real thrill to us.
Yes.
And this is one of my favorite parts of you know, working with young kids. We had, and if I get, you said you got me started.
This is what I want.
You can, you know, cut me off if I get going too far. But there's another story I love. We had a family that with grandparents and children, and family and children, they all lived together. And the only one in the family that could read was Grandpa. And I had the little girl who was, probably mildly retarded, but she was, certainly a little child that needed a lot of help. But anyway, in our class, we had started to have a classroom library, and I bring my sewing machine to school, and I have every child help me make a book bag, and they had their own little book bag. They sat on my lap, and we stitched up this book bag, and we put their name on it and everything. And then I had a lot of books, and we had a system so that the child could take a book or 2 or 3 home every night, bring them back the next day or in a couple of days. And we would do this. We try to do it at the end of every day or a few days. And one day we just hadn't had time to get books out. And the grandpa came in the next day, and he said, how come Lynn didn't bring any books home last night? He said, we didn't have our story last night. And it turned out that grandpa was reading stories to those children, to the whole family. He was reading the stories, these children's stories, every night.
Oh, boy.
And I just saw this young gal who's 19 now. And it's really fun to see her again.
Mm-hmm.
So those early years working with parents were challenging and rewarding.
Well, you established a fine reputation quite early at Emerson. I heard that, I learned it, I knew it, I experienced it. And you were largely working at the kindergarten, first grade level.
Right.
Yeah.
Preschool through first grade. Originally, the Chapter 1 program was preschool, so those were 4-year-olds. And that, I worked there, I forget how many, 83, about 3 or 4 years there, and then the rest was 83 to 96. I worked there 13 years. I said 7, 13 years at Emerson. So 7 years in preschool and 6 in first grade.
As you look back on those 13 years, what could you say was a really outstanding growth of Emerson intellectually? What phase of education do you think really got strengthened?
In the late 80s, I think it was in 1989 or 1990, we had the experience having a young high school group that was called Shawnee Share Group, and Rosie Matthies called me one day and asked me if her high school group could come help with the Christmas party. And I was, of course, delighted, and they made wonderful sweatshirts for the kids. They painted wonderful pictures on them, put their names on them and so forth, and did this all as a surprise. And about 12 high school kids came the day of the Christmas party to help us. And that same day, quite a surprise to me, in walked about 12 more, great big tall people. Most of them there were a couple of women that weren't as tall, but most of them seemed to be very tall, and they were people from Kiwanis, and they had supported this Shawnee Share Group, which I guess eventually became the Key Club. It was that same group.
Right.
And so when people walk into my classroom, I just put them to work, So I put all these people to work. And after the party was over and was very successful, Conrad Turner said, we really enjoyed this and we would like to be involved. Is there anything else that we could do and with your class? And I could just think of all kinds of things. And so we communicated, I don't remember the exact sequence of things, it just sort of evolved. And I told Lee that a lot of these children didn't have anybody at home to read to them, just like they didn't have a grandpa that could read or somebody who cared. A lot of them didn't have any books or anything at home. So I said it would be wonderful if some people could come read with these children. So we set up a rotation, and Kwanians came and they take children from my class and read with them. And they like even during the summer, I remember like 2 days before summer vacation, I thought, what if this could go on during the summer? And so I called Conrad, and the last minute we threw together a little plan, and some Kwanians read with some kids all summer long. They would meet them at school, or they would go to their homes and pick them up and take them to the library and so forth. So it was very successful. So the next year I went to first grade, and so Kiwanis said, could they go to first grade too? Mm-hmm. And so we continued the program, and Ruth Wright was another first grade teacher. She joined, the two of us worked together. And so Kiwanis worked with both of those classes, my class and Ruth's class, and Kwanians came in regularly, read. And I don't remember if it was that year or not that they started helping with field trips, but before long, Conrad kept asking, what else can we do? And so we said, well, we'd like to go on field trips. And he said, what can we do that isn't just giving you money? We want to be involved. And that was certainly, if there's any key thing I would like everybody to think of and remember about Kiwanis is that there are people who are involved. And so Kiwanians went on field trips with us. Roland Matthies went on many field trips to farms, and you had turned 80, I think, and you were still trudging around on the farms with us.
And I'm about to turn 90.
Are you really? Oh, my goodness. And, and reading with the children and so forth. And then, of course, they did the Christmas party. So the next year that we had the Christmas party, still in my classroom, the two classes, and the principal was not happy with the idea that just two classes got all this wonderful benefit. And so rather than, Kiwanis saying, well, that's all we can do, they said, we'll take the whole first grade. So Kiwanis expanded to the whole first grade, and we had reading teams that read with all of the with children in every class, and then provided went on field trips with us. They didn't just provide the field trips; they went on field trips with us, and those were especially wonderful experiences because so many of our children don't have fathers or don't have good experiences with fathers, and most of our Kiwanian buddies that came to Emerson were men, and I felt it was tremendously wonderful role models for these children, and my mind, I began to go off in all different directions, thinking of all these different stories and different children and relationships, but I can, for example, the one story Conrad used to love to tell about, he and Ron Jacobs saw a child standing, he'd come out of school, and he was standing there by the curb crying, and just as Conrad and Ron were driving by, and so they stopped and they asked him what the problem was, and he said he missed his bus. And so Conrad and Ron asked him to get in the car and said they'd take him home. And then after they asked him to get in the car, they got to thinking, well, we're really not, we shouldn't encourage kids to just get into the car with anybody. So they asked him, would you get into the car with strangers? And he says, oh, you're not strangers, you're Kiwanis. That was one of his favorite stories, and I think that's the presence Kiwanis had in our school. People, the kids came to know Kiwanis members as helpers and friends and caring and concerned people. And eventually Kiwanis went on to provide arts council programs, which certainly enriched our kids' lives. Our school couldn't afford those programs, and we didn't have a boosters group that could provide that kind of thing. And so our kids, I had a little child in preschool one time. We were doing some things with, talking about water and boats and things like that. And this child didn't know what a boat was.
I thought, we are 6 miles from a lake, and this child doesn't know what a boat is. And it's just because, you know, his life was in this small, you know, community. He didn't have books and stories and parents that talked to him about things in his life. So Kiwanis, through their presence and art and, you know, relating with the kids and Arts Council programs and field trips and reading, of course, helped, I think, broaden the experiences for these children tremendously.
That's a wonderful review of something that has meant so much to me as well. Now let's go over to what you think has happened at Springfield since you arrived up till now that looks good or looks bad. Just take a shot at it, because this goes into the permanent archives of a historical society to be read someday and to be looked at and to be evaluated on the basis of, are we any better now?
Things.
Okay.
My first thoughts have to do with how the city looked when we came. And in the early years when we were in Springfield, the downtown was kind of dying. A lot of companies that we had heard about were gone, Kroll Collier and you know, others. And so you saw a lot of boarded up buildings, and the businesses downtown that we liked so much, Wren's department store and so forth, eventually disappeared and downtown sort of died. Well, what I see is that there have been a lot of people in Springfield that have cared a lot about Springfield, and I think they're turning that around. And the Springfield downtown, I think, is becoming a beautiful downtown. And we had a small library. It was a wonderful building that people loved, but you couldn't get to it because the parking was so bad. And so it wasn't used to the fullest, and now we have a wonderful library that is, you know, already expanding. And then the Kuss Center and the historical museum that they're developing, they're doing such wonderful things, I think. So I think we've seen wonderful positive changes and a real kernel of people in Springfield that care a lot and have worked hard to turn it around. I think about Wittenberg. We came here, we love, you know, Wittenberg is just such a wonderful, friendly place, which I think it still is. But it was at a time when there was a group called Wittenberg Women. First it was Faculty Wives.
Yeah.
And women that got together when fewer women worked all day, and we had all kinds of opportunities to get to know each other. It was part of that group's efforts to make new faculty members feel welcome, and so people got to know each other. And I think a sad thing that's happened is that because more women are working, it went from Wittenberg Women to, went Faculty Wives to Wittenberg Wives to Wittenberg Women, to include women faculty, and then eventually just petered out. And I think a lot of faculty members are from out of town and so forth. So now there aren't, it used to be that everybody knew each other even as you got older and retired, where now I think you don't have quite that, that's a change that's just happened that I think is too bad. That Wittenberg also has grown and is a wonderful place, and that's just one of those changes in time.
Have you had a good impression of the city administration?
I think we have absolutely fantastic city administration right now. I mean, a couple of people that pop into my mind right now are Matt Kreidler and Warren Copeland, and there are two I think have just done absolutely remarkable things. We have some real leadership, I think, and people like Wes Babian, and those are just people that have done really.
Yeah. I think it's so fine that Wes Babian is getting an honorary degree this
I
next
do
month.
too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think Wittenberg has had some wonderful leadership in the community, and it's building good,
Oh, yes.
powerful relationships
Yeah.
with the community.
Yeah, I was a part of the many administrations ago when there was a tension
Mm-hmm.
between the presidency and the community, and it wasn't good.
Yeah. Paul was on the search committee for Bear Tipson, and that was, it turned out to be one of these experiences where he went with the idea that he's going to be sort of supporting, speaking for faculty and so forth, and he didn't know how it was going to work out. It turned out to be one of those groups that just clicked. They just meshed, and they bonded, almost, you would say, though the people on that search committee, and they wanted Bear Tipson, and worked very hard for him, and are very happy that he came. But Paul would talk about that. I of course he couldn't tell me much about what was going on, but I just get a feeling for it, and that was a wonderful experience. And it's nice to have that kind of thing lead to your new president.
Okay. Betsy, what do you think about the current situation in our public schools?
I'm very, very concerned. I loved teaching for so many years, and I finally left teaching feeling very unhappy about it. The discipline is getting to be so hard. There are so many troubled kids in the schools, and in certain schools probably more than others. I think children are coming to schools not disciplined. I think not everything. Schools can't be responsible for everything. The schools can't be responsible for, a child being fed, well disciplined, with their moral values and everything. So many of those things are developed to a high degree before they ever get to school. And I've seen just such tremendous change in the children and again in the parents. When I finally left teaching, I was feeling so much frustration in working with parents. I wanted so much to help kids, and I felt like I was coming up against a brick wall lots of times. And that's, when I say that I'm really only speaking about a few parents, and say the minority of parents and the minority of kids, but that minority can still be several children or several parents in a class, and that makes a tremendous difference. And I would feel sometimes I was really shortchanging the kids who really wanted to be in school and wanted to work, because I had to give so much energy and time to trying to turn around kids that were so troubled that they could not function well in classes.
At the early level at which you were teaching, do you think there's anything that could have been gained or could still be gained by setting up an honors system as we have in college for the astute youngster that wants to learn? Or would it have such parental repercussions that it wouldn't work?
Okay. I try to think of something like that at Emerson. I think of the kinds of problems that children come to school with. Often they haven't eaten, or a big problem is they haven't had enough sleep. Some of them sleep on living room couches. Now, I have to say, this isn't all kids, and there are so many hardworking, caring parents there. I would never want to generalize and leave those people out, because we certainly have people that would put a lot of us to shame. But we also had so many parents. Well, I've had children that they slept on the couch, so if the parents watched TV till 2 in the morning, the child didn't have a place to sleep until 2 in the morning. I had kids that would tell me about horrible shows that they watched, that I wouldn't watch myself. And of course, then they're tired when they come to school. They're tired. Some of them haven't had adequate food. It wasn't uncommon to have a child come when the weather first turned sunny. They'd come in baggy shorts and so forth because it's always warm outside, and they got themselves dressed and decided what to wear. They hadn't realized because it was sunny outside it might not really be warm. We provided lots of clothes for kids, and we had parents. We had a couple, I think, that probably spent more time I know that the woman spent more time at school than our principal did. She volunteered in the school. She was on traffic, always to make sure the kids got safely back and forth across the street, helped with the boosters and everything. That man and wife did so much for our school and so much for their kids, even after their kids left Emerson. And we had lots of families like that, but we had an awful lot where kids were at least severely neglected, if not abused, and we had children that
Barbara, the warning light indicated that this was the end of the first side, but on checking it back, it appears there's still some tape left. Period. Since doing the tape, I learned from Betsy that she had some second thoughts about some of the material she has dictated, and that she might use some already prepared script, period. So I am asking you to type this as an unfinished piece, and I'll give it to Betsy for editing. As always, thank you very much. End of slide A.
Now we're going
okay.
to finish up.
Okay, we had children that had tremendous needs, and so it's hard to think in terms of an honors program, because when I think of Emerson and kids at Emerson, I think of kids with tremendous needs that come even before academic needs, and I think they need good physical health care and so forth. They also need discipline. I think we have done a very big disservice by not allowing better forms of discipline. All discipline can't be positive behavior modification, that isn't adequate.
Right.
And so I can't, we certainly need to be able to challenge those kids that are there to learn, and it doesn't take more than 1 or 2 kids in a classroom that are terribly, terribly disruptive to disrupt a classroom. You can have a couple of kids that are outstanding students. They don't pull a class up, nearly like a couple of kids that are impossible to deal with pull a class down. And I don't know how you deal with that. I just know that there are a lot of teachers at Emerson School that worked very, very hard and cared a whole lot, and gave lots of extra hours, and then still would read in the newspapers about how the scores in that school are so low. Mm-hmm. And people look at that newspaper and they just think, well, Emerson's not a very good school. They don't really know.
We know better.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Betsy, I think we've come to the... What's that thing flashing?